Welcome to the ClearPath ePortal Developer 4.1 Capabilities demonstration. This video is part of a series of videos which explain the steps to develop different types of data sources and presentation projects in ePortal Developer for modernizing ClearPath applications. In this demonstration, we will show you how to create a web service presentation project. To create a web service presentation project, we should have created a data source project. In this demonstration, we will use an MCP COBOL Data Source project. The eBank data source project we have selected points to an eBank application which implements some simple banking operations such as accessing account balance and transferring funds between accounts. This data source project has message orchestration steps already carried out for handling the connection to MCP server and login. In the orchestration window, notice that under the OnClient Session Start Event Handler, which runs when the application is first connected, we have created a reply action to return the login client message as a response. Similarly, under the onClient.login event handler, we have created a reply action to return the home client message as a response after successful login. For the message orchestration details, you can watch the MCP Data Source message orchestration video. Let's get started. We will add a new Visual Studio project by selecting menu option File, Add, New Project. We will now see the Visual Studio New Project dialog box. Let's select the Web Services project type under the ClearPath Presentation node. We are creating an ASP.NET based WCF web service application. So select the project template WCF ASP.NET Compatibility Service Application. Let's name our web service project as eBank Service. Leave the location to the default value and click OK. We will now see the Presentation Generation Options dialog box. This dialog provides the web service generation options. For example, we can provide a different name to the web service than the default service. Similarly, we can specify a prefix to be used in the web method names. Please note that when we create a web service presentation project, each client message in the data source project will result in a corresponding web method with the same name as the client message. This prefix will be used along with the client message name. Note that since this application requires us to log in, this application requires a session. This means that we need to explicitly call the web service connect method to establish a session before we can call a particular web service method to perform a banking operation. Requiring a session is the default for an MCP application. Setting the option include connect method to true will generate a connect web method automatically. In this demonstration, we will accept the default settings and click OK. Now, let's build a solution by selecting menu option Build, Build Solution. We can test this web service presentation application in Visual Studio IDE. Right-click the eBank Service project in Solution Explorer window and select Set a Startup Project. Then select the menu option Debug Start Debugging to run the WCF test client. WCF test client window will be opened. WCF test client is a GUI tool that enables to invoke a web method and display the response. Tree View in the left pane displays the list of web methods available in the web service. When we double-click a web method, say Send Bufin Transfer Fund, on the right pane a window having request and response sections will be displayed. In Request section, we enter the web method parameters and then click on the Invoke button to invoke the web method. In the response section, we will get the output of the web method. Before we test a web method, right-click on Config File node in the tree view and select Edit with SVC Config Editor. Service Configuration Editor window will be opened. The WCF Service Configuration Editor allows administrators and developers to create and modify configuration settings for WCF services using a graphical user interface. Now, expand the Bindings folder and select Service Binding in the left pane of the Service Configuration Editor. Since our application requires us to log in and requires a session, we must allow cookies so that the login session information can be saved between calls. So let's set the Allow Cookies option to True. Next, click File, Save to save the settings and close the editor. Click Yes if a window is prompted to reload WCF Test Client. Now, double-click the Connect Web method in the left pane of the WCF Test Client. It will open Connect tab in the right pane. Click on the Invoke button. It will return the response in the Response section. Double-click the Send Login web method in the left pane of the WCF Test Client. It will open Send Login tab in the right pane. We need to enter a valid user code and password value in the Login web method. In our case, it is webdev. Then, click the Invoke button. Now, let's first test the SendBuffenGetAccounts web method. Double-click the SendBuffenGetAccounts web method in the left pane of the WCF Test Client. It will open SendBuffenGetAccounts window in the right pane. Select the transcode value as GetAccounts and click on the Invoke button. The Response section displays the account details. Similarly, we can test the web method SendBuffenTransferFunds. For SendBuffenTransferFunds, select the transcode value as transfer funds. Then we will enter the fund transfer details. Amount as 2,000, from account as interest checking, and to account as money market. We will leave the optional fields null. Click the Invoke button to do the fund transfer. We can see that in response we get a confirmation message. We can refine the web service presentation project so that transcode is not required to be selected manually. Whenever we invoke a web method, we must select the correct value for transcode. However, the correct transcode is implied for the particular web method we are calling. For example, when we call SendBuffenGetAccounts, we always want to set transcode as GetAccounts. Now, let's stop debugging by closing the WCF Test Client window so that we can make the changes for setting the transcode automatically. Also make sure that all the ASP.NET Development Server instances started by the Visual Studio to host the web application for testing are stopped by stopping them manually in the system tray. Double-click the BuffenGetAccounts server message to open it in Message Editor for editing. Select the transcode node. In its Properties page, select the initial value as GetAccounts from the drop-down. Then click the visible property and select the false value for it. Similarly, double-click the BuffenTransferFunds message to open it in Message Editor for editing. Select the transcode node. In its Properties page, select the initial value as transfer funds from the drop-down. Then click the visible property and select the false value for it. Please note that when we save the changes in the server message, corresponding client messages will be automatically updated. Build the project by choosing Build Solution. Then, select the menu option Debug, Start Debugging to run the WCF Test Client again. First, we need to enable cookies. Right-click on Config file and select Edit with SVC Config Editor to open Service Configuration Editor window. Expand the Bindings folder and select Service Binding in the left pane of the Service Configuration Editor and set the Allow Cookies option to True. Then save this change. Now, first we need to establish a session with the server. In WCF Test Client window, double-click Connect and then click Invoke button. The server returns the logon response in the response section. Next, double-click the Send Logon Web method. We need to enter a valid user code and password value in the login web method. In our case, it is webdev. Click the Invoke button to log in. Now, in WCF Test Client window, double-click the Send Bufen Get Accounts. As we can see now, transcode field is not visible and we don't need to set its value here. Click on the Invoke button. The response section displays the account details. Similarly, double-click the Send Bufen Transfer Funds method. As we can see now, transcode field is not visible and we don't need to set its value here. We can enter the fund transfer details and click on the Invoke button to do the fund transfer as we did earlier. Now, let's stop debugging by closing the WCF Test Client window. This completes the demonstration. Unisys offers a comprehensive set of ClearPath services to enrich the value of your ClearPath applications, data and systems. Please contact your Unisys representative for more information.